Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to untangle the incredibly public, completely chaotic, and deeply layered dispute between Aaron Smith-Levin and Jenna Miscavige. If you've been anywhere near this story, you know it is just a whirlwind of claims and counterclaims. So, we're going to break it all down step by step.
To really get what's going on here, we have to cut through the noise and the public spin. Instead of getting caught up in the hearsay, we are going to anchor ourselves purely in the documented timelines, the actual police transcripts, and the raw, live reactions from both individuals. Honestly, it's the only way to get a clear picture.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the kitchen incident, a call for police, the dueling live streams, exposing DARVO tactics, and finally, how the cycle continues. Let's just jump right in. All right, Section 1, the kitchen incident. November 10th, 2025. This night is the catalyst for our entire deep dive.
You know, toxic relationships totally thrive on confusion and blurred narratives, right? Because of that, establishing a really strict chronological timeline from the incident in November to Aaron's jail stint, all the way to their shocking reconciliation in 2026 is absolutely essential to figuring out how the truth actually unfolds.
So let's look closely at November 10th. According to Jenna's official police report, this whole altercation started with Aaron literally screaming in her face, getting so loud and so close that he was spitting food at her. The situation escalated when Jenna went into the kitchen and, totally frustrated, threw his pumpkin pie and rolled a watermelon onto the floor. Aaron's response? He charges into the room and physically restrains her.
And the severity of this confrontation really cannot be overstated. Jenna vividly explained to the police dispatcher how Aaron picked her up from behind, pinned her arms, and hoisted her into the air. She stated she was stuck like that for 5 to 10 minutes, struggling while he absolutely refused to let her go. He only stopped when he threatened to call the police himself. She actually ended up fleeing the house with no shoes on, right into one of the coldest nights of the year.
Which brings us to Section 2, a call for police, on December 7th, 2025. Fast forward 2 days after Aaron gets out of a 22-day jail stint for an unrelated bond violation. It is on this day that Jenna officially reports the abuse.
The official police audio here is just a harsh reality check on how domestic abuse investigations actually work. Jenna is calling the Clearwater police from a hotel room, but because the incident happened weeks prior, the dispatcher has to note the lack of fresh, visible bruises. The officer is super straight with her. He explains that without current physical marks or video evidence, building a case is incredibly tough, and he warns her that officially confronting Aaron right now might just trigger further retaliation.
But during that very same police call, something else comes to light. The dispatcher asks about prior violence, and Jenna reveals a previous altercation from a trip to Hawaii. She says she poured water on Aaron during a fight, and he retaliated by picking her up and throwing her across the room. This really paints a broader, much more concerning picture of escalating physical violence over the course of their 2-year relationship.
Moving on to Section 3, the dueling live streams. Later that exact same day, December 7th, this deeply private matter absolutely explodes onto the internet as Aaron attempts to control the narrative the second he hears Jenna contacted the police.
And wow, let's look at how these narratives clash. Aaron's highly polished public claims totally fall apart against Jenna's live reactions. Aaron goes live and claims Jenna was essentially stalking him, begging to come over. But Jenna's reality, which is completely backed by the timeline, reveals that Aaron actually texted her at midnight, explicitly asking her to come over.
The discrepancies just keep coming. Aaron tries to frame Jenna to his audience as someone who flies into these unprovoked, quote, animalistic rages. However, Jenna jumps on her own live response to clarify that her frustration and anger were a completely defensive reaction to his relentless gaslighting, his refusal to apologize, and him screaming at the top of his lungs until his voice literally went hoarse.
Section 4, exposing DARVO tactics. To really get why Aaron is acting this way on a public broadcast, we need to put on our psychology hats for a second and identify a very specific manipulation tactic.
Have you ever heard of DARVO? It stands for Deny, Attack, and Reverse Victim and Offender. It's a textbook psychological response used to shift blame right off the person causing the harm straight on to the person receiving it. And we see this playing out perfectly in Aaron's public defense strategy. Watch how easily we can map DARVO directly onto Aaron's actions. First, deny.
On his live stream, Aaron completely downplays the physical severity of the kitchen incident. He claims he didn't lift her up for 10 minutes. He says he merely held her wrists to stop her from destroying his kitchen. Next, attack. He relentlessly goes after Jenna's mental state, calling her a liar and framing her as unhinged. Finally, reverse. He completely flips the script, casting himself as the exhausted victim of her alleged harassment. It is textbook DARVO.
It gets deeper, too. When we analyze Aaron's later attempts to explain his relationship failures, he leans incredibly hard on blaming his Scientology upbringing. He claims it basically programmed him to prioritize work over everything else, leading to this sort of unintentional neglect. But hold that up against the documented reality, and a massive discrepancy emerges. The issue wasn't just him working too hard. We're talking about documented cheating on multiple partners, intense screaming matches, and police reports detailing physical battery.
Which brings us to Section 5. The cycle continues. Fast forward to February 2026. After all the public streams, the police involvement, the massive fallout, Aaron releases a members-only video that delivers a staggering update to his followers.
Safely tucked behind a paywall, kept away from the broader public, Aaron proudly announces that he and Jenna are back together. He states they are committed for life, claiming they've supposedly learned from their past mistakes and have implemented a, quote, positive feedback loop.
But here is the deeply concerning element. This reunion maps flawlessly onto the clinical cycle of abuse. You have the building tension, it explodes into that severe violent incident in November, and then swoops straight into this honeymoon reconciliation phase by February, which inevitably leads to a temporary calm before the tension just builds all over again.
2. That is the number of years this couple has been trapped in this exact loop. For over 2 whole years, they have weathered major breakups, alleged infidelities, and physical altercations, only to hit reset and repeat the cycle over and over again, dragging their friends, their audiences, and even the police right into the crossfire.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, looking at this stark timeline leaves us with a really critical question to chew on. When we can literally see the documentation, the DARVO tactics, the police reports, the repeating patterns, how can we better recognize these manipulation tactics in real time? How do we actually support the people trapped in these toxic loops? It's a complicated, heartbreaking reality, but untangling the structure of these events is step one. Thanks so much for joining me to break this down, and keep seeking the truth behind the spin.